Okay. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a while since we have been alive here. This is Arknolia and the Doctor in our episode of Music Memories here. This is episode 16, if I'm. Yeah, yes, it
That is
is.
correct.
Yeah, 16. I've been doing a lot of counting here. And tonight we're looking at one of the most iconic British bands out there to emerge during the British invasion. Um, It was psychedelic, it was hard rock, it was blues bass, and this group featured one of the three iconic guitarists of all time, being Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, and Eric Clapton. And we're talking about, of course, the Yardbirds. Now,
Absolutely.
the Yardbirds were I guess you could say, were the funk that put in the funk when it came to British blues rock there, if you want to say so. They formed in London in 1963, and one of the core lineups featured, vocalist and harmonica player Keith Relf, drummer Jim McCarty, Chris Dreja, I think it's
Right.
Dreja. Yeah, is that spelled that right? Dreja? Or
Yeah.
Drea? Yeah, okay. Chris Dreja on rhythm guitar and bass, bassist and producer Paul Samuel Smith, and of course the three guitar players that would join: Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, and Jeff Beck. Home,
They
home
actually started with Eric Clapton and basically moved through. It was only a short period of time where Beck and Page played together, but
yeah,
by and large, it was like, one after the other.
yeah. That one of the moments where the Page and Beck played together was in a movie called Blow Up. I guess it came. It was direct. I forgot which year it was, but it was their version of Train Kept a Rollin' there. But however, here's the thing, it was changed to a different line, a different song. Now they recorded their version of Train Kept a Rollin' for the movie Blow Up, which was directed by Michelangelo and Antonioni, yeah, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I believe that's correct.
Yes, Ralph had to change the song's lyrics and title to avoid having to seek permission from the copyright holder. Their appearance in the film about a hip fashion photographer undergoing an existing crisis in swinging London came after The Who declined to appear in the movie and the in crowd were unable to attend the filming. Now, the Velvet Underground, which was of course sponsored by Andy Warhol, were also considered for that part, but weren't able to get work permits in the UK. So the director instructed Beck to smash his guitar in the same way Pete Townsend, who of the Who would. So and
Yeah,
believe
and that had to tear back up.
I know. Well, actually, and the guitar, by the way, that Beck destroyed was a cheap Hofner instrument, by the way. And so I guess it was a cheap ass guitar. But then again, who knows? They probably got themselves another one. You know.
Yeah.
Now we all know the Yardbirds. They're known for their first big hit, "For Your Love," which had kind of like an Egyptian, kind of like a Maharati type of feel when you look at it there. Um,
Yeah, and actually, a lot of their first album, a pretty good bit of it anyway, was blues based.
yes.
And For Your Love was the song that kind of made Eric Clapton decide he needed to leave.
Yeah, because it was sort of leaning towards the regular rock, the pop crowd there, and Clapton at the time is a blues guy. And
Oh, yeah.
when you see the group of guys that you enjoy playing the blues with drift towards a different direction, that's not going to please you very much. So he left to join John Mayall's Blues Breakers project for a couple of
Yeah.
years there.
Yeah, which actually those albums were good too.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was somebody we forgot to talk about in the British Invasion was John Mayall.
Yeah, that's right.
And
You
he
don't
had a
think of it.
ton of albums.
Yeah, lots of albums and lots of lineup changes as well
Oh,
in
yeah.
his group there.
Yeah, when we get back to our cleaning up the British invasion and finishing
Yep.
with it, we need to talk about him because he has a lot of influence and he had a lot of great songs. Invasion with John Mayall and
Yeah, that's
albums.
right.
And he
Don't
had a
think of it. Yep,
so he's
absolutely.
worth discussion. And another guy that's worth discussing is Brian Auger.
Brian Auger. We also got to get into good, the Arthur Brown from the course the Crazy World of Arthur Brown. Of course we got Lord Sutch. We got to talk about.
Right.
Absolutely,
Right.
we got to discuss him because he is very rarely spoken of when it comes to the shock rock terms. There.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But we'll get to them.
absolutely there. Now the Yardbirds, as you know, had a string of hits with For Your Love, Heart Full of Soul, Shapes of Things, which, by the way, Gary Moore, the one time the Thin Lizzy guitarist, did his near the almost heavy metal like version of back in 1984. I don't know if you remember his version of that song, but it was a kicker, man.
Yeah, and actually, Jeff Beck did another version with his group with Rod Stewart
Yeah,
singing.
the Jeff Beck group, yeah.
Yep. Which is actually another part of the British invasion, I suppose.
Absolutely. And of course, we cannot forget their other hit, Over, Under, Sideways, Down. Now,
Yeah.
they also had other hits, as I mentioned. And of course, their version of I'm a Man, the Spencer Davis group cover there. They also did
Well, actually,
Good
that was
Morning.
slightly different.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the lineup with Clapton recorded two songs, I Wish You Would and Good Morning Schoolgirl. And
Yeah.
this was prior to scoring their big hit with For Your Love,
Right.
which was written by Graham Goldman and a prominent harpsichord part by Brian Auger. Of course, For Your Love hit the top of the UK charts in Canada and reached number 6 here in the States. But of course, as we know, it displeased Clapton all to hell. He was a blues purist and decided to leave when the group started becoming more commercial. Now he left.
And the funny thing was, that was really their only journey into commercial.
Yeah, that's about it. The rest of the time, they kind of like kept true to themselves with the psychedelic blues rock type of stuff there.
Right.
But here's the thing, something else. Clapton recommended Jimmy Page, a young session guitar player, to replace him. Content with his sessions work and worried about both his health and politics of Clapton's departure, Jimmy Page in turn recommended his friend Jeff Beck. Beck played his first gig with the Yardbirds after 2 days after Clapton decided to leave. Now, Beck had an exploration of fuzz tone, reverb, feedback, sustain, distortion, and hammer-on soloing that fit well with the group at that time. And
he basically is the one that pushed him into the psychedelia.
Yeah, and which they did pretty well. Now they began to experiment with a lot of eclectic arrangements, Gregorian chants, and various European and Asian styles, while Beck infused a Middle Eastern influence into the mix. He was also voted number one lead guitarist in the 1966 British music magazine Beat Instrumental. Now, they produced a number of groundbreaking recordings, including, of course, the ones we mentioned, Heart Full of Soul, Shapes of Things, their cover of Bo Diddley's I'm a Man, Evil Hearted You / Still I'm Sad. And the album that those songs came from was it was simply called Yardbirds, but it was also known as the Roger the Engineer album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what is the story on this? Apparently, it featured this guy named Roger something.
Well, he was the engineer, and Chris Drasia had drawn a photograph of him and labeled it Roger the Engineer.
Ah.
Everybody looked at it and said, "I like that." And the British release of that album featured the photo and the Roger the Engineer, and that's what they ended up calling it.
As
and
a
in
subtitle.
America, and in America, it was just simply released as Over, Under, Sideways, Down.
Yeah.
But the re-release, they changed it to Roger the Engineer and added about no, I think it's 4 tracks
Hmm.
that were originally left off the Over Under Sideways Down album. And
Nice.
that overall is a good album.
Yeah.
Uh, their backtracking a little bit, their first album, For Your Love, featured For Your Love, but it also had a lot of blues on it. And that album had a lot of Eric Clapton on it, and
Yes.
it featured a lot of their covers of blues songs and such. The second album is interesting. It's
Yeah.
called Having the Rave Up. Side one is studio tracks with Jeff Beck. Side two is live recordings of when they had Eric Clapton. So that album has Beck and Clapton on it. The
Ah,
live side
nice.
has Clapton. The
Just not the same
studio side,
studio.
yeah, and that's a pretty good album too, actually. In fact, a lot of people will tell you for that period of time, the Yardbirds live recordings were among the best out there. The quality was good, the sounding was good, and for the '60s, it was absolutely phenomenal for a live album. And it's some interesting. And they pulled them from an album that's released in the UK called Five Live Yardbirds, which has other songs on it too.
Yeah.
And that's a good one. And then the third one was Roger the Engineer,
Uh-huh.
Over Under Sideways Down, whatever it was called.
But
And that,
either way, so we often call it Roger the Engineer because it was
yeah,
censored because of the cover, you know.
right. And it's probably their most exploratory. Personally, it's my favorite of their albums. It's good. It's a good listen
Yeah, it is.
overall.
I gotta
It's
check that out, definitely, man.
yeah, it's worth your time. And when we get to our top 15 or my top 15, I'm going to mention quite a few off that album.
Yeah. Now,
And then they had at least one other album called Little Games, which was kind of for lack of a better word, an album that was kind of what would happen when a group's fixing to break up. Some of the songs are good, some of the songs are not that good, but it's not bad. It's just kind of an exploration, I guess, and it was about the time that Page was putting together his new band that he called the New Yardbirds first,
yep.
and then changed it to
Of course,
Led
Led
Zeppelin.
Zeppelin. Thanks to Keith Moon's a little tidbit about them.
Yeah, the interesting thing was when I read it, John Entwistle had a part in it too.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, in fact, that the story goes that they were trying to put a super group together with Page, Entwistle, Moon, two or three others. I forget who they were, and Entwistle made the remark that that would go over like a lead balloon, and then Moon said more like a Led Zeppelin.
Because the Zeppelin was bigger than a balloon there, obviously, which is
Yeah,
how they referred it back then, and that's when the name kind of stuck in Page's head when he called his band that.
yeah, he kind of harkened back to that and said, I like that name. I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
And Led Zeppelin they became.
Yep, and here's another thing. Speaking of Zeppelin, I've mentioned this story before, and it definitely needs to be repeated here. We know the Zeppelin song "Dazed and Confused," correct? We know that like the back of our
Right.
hands. Now, now that was originally inspired by the song of the same name by a folk singer from the U.S. named Jake Holmes. He released his album on the Capitol Records or Tower Records, distributed by Capitol EMI at that time, and
Yeah,
the song "Dazed and Confused" was just a regular folky type of song there, but with different
yeah,
lyrics and almost in the same arrangement. Now, the Yardbirds was doing a gig with this guy, and Page heard the song being performed and kind of liked it and suggested to the band, "Hey, let's do our cover
yeah.
version
Let's
of
do
it,
it.
but
Exactly.
yes." And there was no studio recordings of their cover version, but they did perform it live a couple of times. One time on YouTube, and as I mentioned this, it was on a French television program, and that's when we first saw Page use the violin bowl on his guitar there, and Keith Relf with the harmonica during the section. It was mostly rearranged the same way as Zeppelin's "Days Confused" would be. Fear Hereafter. And when I first heard the video, I thought, oh man, gosh, this must be the original version before Robert Plant changed the lyrics on there. Turns out, they decided to rearrange it, and however, Jake Holmes got word of this, and he did sued Led Zeppelin, for the obvious reason there. And
Sure.
now, when you look at the reissues of the first Led Zeppelin album, it'll say right there, written by Jimmy Page, inspired by Jake Holmes.
Right.
Yep.
A form of credit.
Yeah, form of credit, basically there. But Jake Holmes probably got a lot of nods, a lot of interviews about that song there, because this is so, because this obviously we know, because people often say, this is the man that inspired the Zeppelin version.
Yeah, and it's funny. Well, it's not the first time Led Zeppelin's been accused of stealing a song.
Oh man, they plagiarize a lot of things. I mean, like there was a thing called by the Booker T and the MGs called The Hunter. Robert Plant interpreted that into their version of their song, how many more times from the first record.
Right.
And of course, we cannot forget the Stairway to Heaven at Taurus case there, which was settled out of court, which, by the way, favor again in Zeppelin's favor, by the way. And by the way, we also can't forget the song Beck's Bolero, which was an instrumental, I guess, from what I understand. It was inspired by Raving's Bolero, credited to Page, although Peck also written the song. John Paul Jones on bass, Keith Moon on drums, Nicky Hopkins on piano. At the time of this session, as you mentioned, they suggested this group would go up like a lead balloon, and of course we all know the story there. Beck's Bolero would later be a...
That's on Jeff Beck's album.
Yeah, the
Truth,
album
I think.
Truth, yes. The Jeff Beck Group's album Truth. Now, they opened for the Rolling Stones in 1966 with the Ike and Tina Turner also on the bill. They released the Happening single, shot their scenes for the movie Blow Up, which I mentioned earlier, head back to the U.S. for a show at the Fillmore West in San Francisco. They did a slot with Dick Clark's Caravan on Stars tour there, which they joined it in Texas.
Right.
And after a few shows on the Caravan tour, Beck stormed out and headed back to San Francisco, and Mary Hughes and the band still in Texas continued on that tour as a quartet, with Jimmy Page, of course, as the sole lead guitarist. Now, from what I understand, Beck was... in later interviews, Beck, and he even mentioned this during the induction of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that he was kicked out of the group.
Right.
Yeah. So we don't really know the whole story there.
No, probably not.
I know.
What's interesting about this group is they were only around for, 5-6 years, and their influence and the body of work they did are absolutely phenomenal if somebody wasn't around that long.
Yep. Wow, I hear something
and what
else.
they did for us.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, Beck later was caught up that same year in late November, at which point he eventually left the group. Beck's lack of professionalism, his temper tantrum, and of course Keith Relf's drunkenness, the grueling, unrewarding tour on that Caravan of Stars tour, and plus with other pressures, were cited as probably one of the big reasons why. None of which involved Beck actually being fired. Beck's official departure was announced on November 30th in the U.S. Yardbirds finished their remaining U.S. dates, of course, with Page as their sole lead guitarist, headed back to the U.K. for more shows scheduled by Napier Bell, and of course Beck continued on as a solo artist with the Jeff Beck Group, with of course Rod Stewart as their frontman.
Yeah, I think they recorded 2 albums.
I believe so, yeah.
The Truth album, I wish I could remember the name of the other
Yeah,
one.
and we
I know
who
it had a black cover, but I can't remember the name of it.
uh, and we cannot forget the song "Ain't Superstitious." That was played
Right.
on the radio a lot of times. Pretty damn good song there, real bluesy there, electric blues, I guess you would say there. Now,
Yeah.
Now he introduced it playing his guitar with a cello bow, as we all know, which was suggested to him by a violinist by the name of David McCallum Sr. And the combination of a wah-wah pedal in addition to a distortion fuzz box, that would be later become a Jimmy Page trademark. Other innovations included the use of a tapped noise loop in live settings
Right.
on the track Glimpses, and an open-tuned guitar to enhance the sitar-like sounds of the Yardbirds that were known for in their earlier songs.
Yeah.
Now, however, around this time, the commercial fortunes for the band were really starting to decline. Happenings from 10 years ago only reached number 30 in the U.S. Top 100. And,
Actually, it's happenings 10 years time ago.
yeah, and the band dropped Naper Bell and entered into a partnership with a Columbia House hit-making producer Mickey Mose, who also worked with the Animals at that time. He's
Right.
known for his work not with just the Animals, Hermits, and Scottish singer Donovan. And yet this move failed to reignite any chart success. After the disappointing sales of that album, the single Little Games was released in 67. Sadly, it flopped it so badly that the EMI did not release another Yardbirds record until after the band broke up.
Yeah. And actually, Little Games is a decent little song.
Yeah. Apparently, also a 1968 UK release of the Goodnight Sweet Josephine single was planned but canceled, of course, at the last minute. Their
Right.
version of Tony Hazard's "Ha Ha," said the clown, which only Keith Rowe performed on, backed by the original, which only performed all the instruments on,
Right.
backed by the song "Tinker, Tailor, Soldier,
And that's
Sailor," which was written
that's a
by
decent little song too.
which was written by Ralph and Jim McCarty, the drummer. It was the last single to enter the U.S. Top 50, peaking at number 44 on the Billboard's charts in the summer of '67. Now, Epic Records, our U.S. label, compiled the 6 earlier A-sides hits and the B-sides,
Yeah.
New York City Blues and Still I'm Sad, with their heaviest material from For Your Love, like I'm Not Talking and Smokestack Lightning from Having a Rave Up. They
Right.
released the Yardbirds' greatest hits in the U.S. on March of that year. The album featured the first appearance of the song Happenings and, of course, Shapes of Things on that album.
Yeah, because
Although,
they were both singles and weren't on albums. That was the way things were in the 60s.
now there was a song that was supposed to have been included, but sadly it wasn't, called Psycho Daisies, which was
Yeah.
only released in the UK as a B-side there. It described the greatest hits album described to the Yardbirds' growing American audience an almost complete picture of what made the Yardbirds a great band, according
Yeah.
to Bruce Eder from All Music Critic.
Yeah, it pretty much encompassed their career.
Yep.
It took little bits from here and there, and there was actually a bunch of well, they were all pretty good songs.
Hmm.
And the variation was good. I mean, you got a little bit of, like you said, a little bit of flavor from all the different permutations of the Yardbirds.
Yep. Exactly. Now, it was the greatest hits album was their best-selling U.S. release, peaking at number 28 on the Billboard charts. Now, they spent the first half of '67 touring New Zealand, Denmark, France, Australia, including a stop at Gaines to help promote the movie Blow Up, which he had appearance in, as we mentioned. They also had played a handful of shows in the UK in June of that year before heading to Vancouver. That'd be to start their North American tour with, of course, Page. I guess this was when it became a four-piece there. Now, the last album they recorded, Little Games, was released in July of '67. Again, only in the U.S. It was a
Yeah.
it was a commercial and critical non-entity. A cover of Harry Neeson's Ten Little Indians charted briefly in the States there.
Yeah, it was. If you listen to it, it's kind of clear that this was an album that was made generally in a hurry just to get an album out,
Yep.
and there wasn't a whole lot of care taken into this.
Yeah. So it's just, let's hurry up and get this done so we can just get it out there. Bing, bam, boom. Which was
Yeah,
up and how it was done at that time. Because back then, like the Beatles and other British acts, other U.S. acts as well, they had to get that album as soon to get albums out soon as much as they can. One every year, one every year, one every year, and that continued for about throughout the '70s and '80s. Then throughout the '90s, bands started saying, "Hey, we need a little bit of time off before we record another album, so we could get our creative gears going here." And that's where we started seeing bands release albums between either 2 or 3 years later on.
yeah, because a lot of times out bands would have 3 or 4 hit singles, 2 or 3 hit singles, whatever.
Yep.
They'd put those together, then record filler
Filler tracks.
for the rest of the album. Now that
Yep.
wasn't always the case, but
Hmm.
it did happen more often than not.
Yes.
And except the Beatles didn't really do that,
Not
but
really.
a lot of the other groups did.
Yeah.
Uh, they just basically, especially the lesser known groups, it was kind of like, oh, let's do this song. Okay, let's do this song. That's that sort of thing.
Right.
And basically, that's kind of what they did.
And of course, this is when Peter Grant would later enter the picture as their new manager. Now, Peter Grant, keep in mind, was a former bouncer at various nightclubs. He also did some pro wrestling back at that time, and he was a big ass dude, man. He was one of the guys.
Yeah.
He was basically one of those guys that you did not cross paths with.
No.
And if you did, it will be the only time you did it because he was apparently a badass at that time. There was a story that some security guard smacked at John Bonham's son Jason for taking this sign off the something there. John and Peter Grant found out about it, they confronted the security guard and I guess took him into the room and I guess beat the living crap out of this guy for that. You do not want to fuck with with John Bonham's son, that's for sure. There.
All right.
And especially when you have a former pro wrestler. And of course, this is the guy that really stuck up for the band. He fought hard for the Zeppelin, as well as Bad Company, who we'll manage later on. Word has
Right.
it that he often witnessed how bands got ripped off by promoters, club managers, and agents. And when he started becoming a manager for the Yardbirds, which later became Led Zeppelin, he vowed never to let that happen to his boys. That's for sure. In fact, in the past, he advocated that the record label pay for the album cover arts themselves instead of
Yeah.
the band, cutting the costs for that because that's how they did it back in the day.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, the band ended up paying for a lot of stuff,
absolutely. Yeah,
and the record label didn't really pay for anything.
yeah, exactly. And it's also he negotiated this deal where Led Zeppelin earned the majority of money from promoters there. Of course, the promoters would have a fit about this, but they had to go
Sure.
they had to go along with it because they knew Led Zeppelin would be big one ass money making draw. They would draw
Right.
money. If Zeppelin were to do a reunion tour today, no doubt they'd be filling up each and every fucking stadium in the whole globe.
Right.
No matter what, man. Jeez.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now the Yardbirds also covered the song "Waiting for the Man," which was originally recorded by the Velvet Underground, and of course, Bob Dylan's "Most Likely You Go Your Way and I'll Go Mine," and of course we
Right.
mentioned the Jake Holmes thing there.
Right.
You know, of course, Now by '68, the psychedelic blues rock of Cream and the Jimi Hendrix Experience was, of course, had became most popular. But yet, McCarthy and Ralph wished to pursue a style more influenced by folk and classical music. And Page wanted to continue with the more heavier music sound, which of course he would carry on with his later band. Now, Dreja was developing an interest in photography. In fact,
Right.
by March, Keith and McCartney, no, excuse me, McCarthy and Ralph had decided to leave, but were persuaded by the other two and stay for at least one more America tour. Now, the final single was recorded in January and released it 2 months later, reflecting on the differences and divergences of the band members and their producer. The A side, Goodnight Sweet Josephine, was another song produced by Mickey Most, and the flip side, Think About It, was a proto Zeppelin riff and snippets of the Days of Confused guitar solo, but yet it failed to chart on the Billboard Top 100. Now, a concert and some album tracks were recorded in New York City in March and in early April, and the unreleased song "Knowing That I'm Losing You" an early includes, excuse me, an early version of the track that would become recorded by Led Zeppelin, known as "Tangerine."
Right.
All were shelved by the band's request, but after Led Zeppelin became successful, Epic Records tried to release the concert material as Live Yardbirds featuring Jimmy Page. And now,
Yeah, yeah.
yep,
That was the album that had that version of I'm Confused on it.
yep, or Days Confused, yeah.
Well, they called it I'm Confused on that
Oh,
album.
okay. No, I see there. Yeah. Now, the album was sadly withdrawn after Page's lawyers filed an injunction against Epic Records for doing that. Now, they played their last shows on May 31st and June 1st at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, and on June 5th and 4th at the Spring Fair in Montgomery International Speedway in Alabama, Georgia. The Los Angeles shows were documented in the bootleg release Last Rave Up in LA. Now, the Yardbirds announced the departure of Ralph and McCartney in a press release on June 12th, titled Two Yardbirds Fly. They're returning home to play one last show on the July 7th of '68 at the College of Technology in Bedfordshire, supported by the a group project called the Lytton Gray Sound, and the Gray there spelled is a Grae. Now, Rolling Stone magazine announced the breakup by saying Page tends to do some solo recording. And by the way, Chris Deja, who he later became a photographer, he was the one who shot the back cover of Zeppelin's first album. By the way, there.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Page and Grant, they got along pretty good. They were like tour de force when it come to how to do a group, pretty much there. Now, Page and Dreja, with the tour scheduled in late summer of '68, saw the breakup as an opportunity to put a new lineup together, with Page as producer and Grant as the manager. He described his vision for the new band as kind of like a college collage of sound that will include some Mellotron keyboards while still playing the guitar, Procol Harum's B.J. Wilson, Paul Francis, and session man Clem Cantini, who had guested on a few Yardbirds songs there, were also the most under the supervision of Mickey Most, were considered as drummers. Young vocalist and composer Terry Reid was asked to replace Keith Relf, but declined because of a new contract he had with the Mickey Most and recommended an unknown singer named Robert Plant. Plant, in return, recommended his childhood friend John Bonham as a drummer. Chris Deja bowed out to pursue a career as a rock photographer. John Paul Jones, who was a bassist, keyboardist, and arranger, had worked with Page on countless sessions in the past, with the Yardbirds included, approached Page and offered his services. And the rehearsals started in mid-August of 1968, and by early September, the new Yardbirds embarked on their first Scandinavian tour, in which the band returned to the UK to produce what later become the first Led Zeppelin album.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that possibly is one of the biggest debuts ever.
Yep. And of course, Zeppelin will become one of the biggest bands that the world has ever yet to see. Still today, Zeppelin, any Zeppelin albums on the Atlantic Records catalog seems to outsell whether everybody else, whether it's other acts like Kid Rock, or whether it's Lauren Branigan on that record label, or Twisted Sister, or Rat, or any other rock act on the Atlantic Records label. Zeppelin outsells them all.
Yeah.
Now, there was a sad story that involved Keith Relf here, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, apparently what the story was, Keith Relf was swimming in I guess he put together a band called Armageddon, for what I understand there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let me look up the story of what just happened here. I guess, let me, give me a few minutes here. Okay, give me a few minutes here there. He died, he died in the 1976 there. Now, here's the thing. He died in the basement of his home in 1976 at age 33 from electrocution.
Yeah.
Apparently what it was, he had several health problems throughout his life, including emphysema and asthma, and for which medications commonly used to treat those conditions at that time. And what happened is that apparently the story was he was swimming in his pool, didn't dry himself off when he got out, went in his basement and plugged in an electric guitar and zapped himself to death.
Yeah.
And sadly, that would later inspire when Led Zeppelin found out about this. They were, of course, shocked, and this prompted a condition.
Ironically.
This prompted Zeppelin never to play in any festival or outdoor venue if it was raining.
Right.
They did that one time because of what had happened. They were playing this performance as some sort of an outdoor show there, and it started raining, and apparently fearing being electrocuted like Keith Relf did, they decided to leave the stage, stopped end the show there, and a lot of fans pretty much got upset, causing a riot, from what I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now, the Yardbirds, of course, as you know, was inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, along with, of course, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Chris Deja, Jim McCartney,
Right.
and, of course, Eric Clapton. Now, the Yardbirds did reform in 1992.
Sort of.
Sort of, yes. It's a couple original members with a couple new members as well. We've seen this happen many times before. From Rock Artist Management, Peter Barton contacted Jim McCarthy about possibly reforming the Yardbirds. He was interested, but he would only do it if Chris Deja would agree. But at the time, he thought it would be highly unlikely that Deja would want to tour again. Barton contacted Deja, who agreed to give it a try. Their debut gig was booked at the Marquee Club in London, along with the newly reformed Animals. That show was a complete success. This lineup included John Iden on bass and the lead vocals. Barden managed the band and booked all their dates for over a decade, and he still works with the band on occasional times there. In 2003, a new album from the Yardbirds entitled Birdland was released under the Yardbirds name on the record label entitled Favored Nations. This included Jim McCartney, Chris Dreja, new members, Jippy, Mayo. That's a kind
Yeah,
of a odd.
I've actually heard that album. It's not half bad,
Yeah,
but it's not the real Yardbirds.
that's true there. John Iden on bass and lead vocals, and Alan Glenn on harmonica and backup vocals. And it consisted of new material mostly penned by McCarthy, and re-recorded some of their old hits, like
Right.
featuring guest appearances by Jeff Skunk Baxter, the Doobie
Yeah,
Brothers.
that lineup is something else
Yes.
of the
Um,
guests.
John Resnick of the Goo Goo Dolls, Steve Lukather of Toto, Brian May of Queen, Slash from Guns N' Roses, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, and of course, Simon McCarthy and Martin Deacham. Now, also, Jeff Beck did reunited with his former bandmates for the song My Blind Life. And then there was the rare and guest appearance on stage in 2005 from their first guitarist from the 60s, Topham.
Yeah, he actually preceded Clapton.
Yep, exactly. Now, according to his let's see when you find here. There he is. Almost lost track here. Now, since the release of the Birdland album, Mayo was replaced briefly by Jerry Donahue, and subsequently in 2005 by the 20-year-old Ben King, while Glenn has been replaced by Billy Boy what's his damn name here? S
I don't know where you are, so
Oh, yeah. Miss Schism. That's a weird name there.
yeah.
Now this guy was was in a group called the Nine Below Zero. I only heard about this on the one of the episodes of the Young Ones, where they did this song during I guess for some, I forgot the song's title there. But in 2007, the Yardbirds released a live CD recorded on July 19th, 2006, entitled Live at B.B. King Blues Club. Also released it on Favored Nations. Now, the first episode of the 2007 and 2008 season of The Simpsons featured the Yardbirds' cover of I'm a Man from the CD, that CD. Now, according to his website, John Iden resigned from the Yardbirds on August 2008. Though his last gig with them was on Friday, April 24, 2009, when they headlined the first concert at the new live room venue in, I guess it's called Twickenham Rugby Stadium. This was also Glenn's last gig with the band and temporary standing in when that guy whose name I cannot pronounce was unavailable. They were replaced by Andy Mitchell on the lead vocals, harmonica, and acoustic guitar, and David Smale on bass and backup vocals. Now, David Smale was the brother of the virtuoso guitar Jonathan Smale. Now, Dreja sat out of the U.S. Tour in the spring of 2012 to recover from an illness. And it was announced in 2013 that he was leaving the band for medical reasons to replace it by the original guitarist, Topham. Now, McCarthy announced it in December of 2014 that the current lineup had disbanded. He told fans in an email that he would be working on solo ventures and other Yardbirds projects in 2015.
Right.
Which of course turned out to be not true, as they were on tour in 2015. In May of that year, Topham left the band and was replaced by one Earl Slick. Now he worked with David Bowie and played guitar on John Lennon's last solo album, Double Fantasy, as well as the sessions which would become Milk and Honey, the album's sequel, believe it or not.
Hmm.
Though, however, he never played, even though he never really played a gig with the band, believe it or not, according to this. Now, in August that year, they would announce that they would play the E-Pie Club in Twickenham, West London. It was a lineup of John Iden, Jim McCarty, Ben King, David Snail, and Billy Boy Miskism, I think it's called. It was announced that the Boston bass guitarist Johnny A would become the newest member of the group for their North American tour. And I believe that at one time they had a former Billy Squier bassist Kenny Harrison on bass at one point. That's right there. Oh, gosh. Now, the Yardbirds were, of course, a part of the British blues scene in the 1960s. And, of course, as the blues rock genre developed, other acts like Chicken Shack were playing a lot more louder and aggressive style. While they emphasized instrumental textures and extended instrumental improvisations, they covered blues classics like Hollywood's Smokestack Lightning and Bo Diddley's I'm a Man, and which had a repetitive structure where instrumental solos were brief breaks between the repetition of verses. They extended those instrumental sections into heavy jams there.
Right.
And I guess, as we all know, they're still together, I guess, but not the, with Jim McCarty's Yardbirds, I guess you would say there.
Yeah, it's totally different.
Totally different. One original member with a whole bunch of new guys. So basically, to put forth in street terms, this lineup of the Yardbirds is pretty much a quote-unquote tribute band. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. I guess a top 15 list,
okay,
and you can go, oh, I know that song, or I don't know that song.
all right, okay,
My number 15 is Smokestack Lightning.
nice,
It's a live version on Having the Rave Up. And then number 14 is a song called White Summer. It's on the Little Games, but it's a nice little acoustic piece
which
by
Jimmy Page, because
right.
he covered it. Because there was a BBC thing there, the BBC Live Radio Hour, which was broadcasted on one of the local stations back in Michigan, that had a Page performing that track before he would do Black Mountain Side.
Yeah, it's a nice little song. It's an acoustic number.
Yes, great song, by the way.
And number 13 gets into the blues a little bit. It's on their first album. It's called I'm Not Talking, which is a decent little song. It does some of their raving and stuff.
Yep.
And my number 12 is Train Kept A-Rolling.
Oh yeah, or their version of it, that was featured in the Blow Up version there, in the movie
Right.
Blow Up, I should say there.
Well, this one's the one on Having a Rave Up.
Ah,
And number 11, I got a song called Turning to Earth, which is on Roger the Engineer. Number 10, I got Jeff's Boogie, which is a nice little Jeff Beck number.
mm-hmm.
Number 9, I got a song called Ever Since the World Began, which is another neat little song. Let's see, number 8 I got is that I'm Confused off the live album. Anderson Theater, I think is the name of the album. Number 7, I got Heart Full of Soul. Number 6, I got Over, Under, Sideways, Down. Number 5, I'm finding A Lost Woman, which is on Roger the Engineer. Another real nice song with some great bass line on it. And the James Gang did a cover of that song too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Number 4 is, to me, a great psychedelic number, Happenings 10 Years Time Ago. And then number 3 is Mr. You're a Better Man Than I, which is on there, Having a Rave Up. Another pretty neat song. Number 2, I got one you probably haven't heard, but it's one of those songs I was talking about earlier that you like, but you can't explain why. It's called Farewell, and it's on the Roger the Engineer album. It's only a minute 30, but it's a neat little song. I don't know why, but I really like that song.
Ah, nice.
And my number 1, which, that could always change, but right now it's Shapes of the Thing.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Shapes of Things is a great little song.
Absolutely. I remember seeing a small clip of that version there from some sort of a show that they did. I guess I forgot it was, but it was like an odd setup that they had up there. But you could see
Well, they always said that was a song that they couldn't play live, and they did.
Mm-hmm. Because it's kind of funny is that I saw before Jeff did his solo there, he had to reach down over and press one of the buttons there for some reason on his guitar pedal there.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I had to probably adjust the volume or something like there. I don't know what the deal was.
Yeah, that brake goes off and does things, which sounds like about 3 different guitars.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
They always said that's one they couldn't play live.
That's true.
But somehow they managed to pull that one off. And again, there's honorable mentions and songs I didn't mention that were good too. But right now, today, that's my 15th favorite.
All right. I'm gonna possibly do my top 3. Actually, I'm gonna do my top 4 song of the Yardbirds here. I'm gonna start with Over, Under, Sideways, Down because of the way the guitar is arranged here, the psychedelic moment there. It kind of like has the same feel as 19th Nervous Breakdown by the Rolling Stones there.
Right.
It's like you're in a party and you have that song playing and you're feeling over, under, sideways, down, like you're spazzing out at one of those psychedelic parties there. And that's the only feel I got from that song there. Now,
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, number 3 would have to be Shapes of Things because, as I mentioned, the way it was played, the way it was done, and plus the fact that Gary Moore, the thick, thin, easy guitars, he did his version on the 1984 album titled "Victims of the Future," which I highly recommend, folks. Massive cover version by him. Real powerful version, and the Yardbirds was pretty powerful just as well. It's kind of like has like a drastic march of feel to the song there.
Right.
Yeah, and of course my top number 2 would have to be For Your Love because it kind of like when you listen to that. I mean, when you have that the kind of has that Egyptian Indian approach to it. It's kind of like out of a James Bond kind of a feel when you think about it, when you listen to the intro.
Right.
All right. And I know I said top 4, but I'm going to say top 5 here because number 2 is, of course, Heart Full of Soul because it's ex-boyfriend reaching out to his ex-love, trying to tell her that he still thinks of her, that he still loves her, but if she doesn't love him back, so be it. You still have my love. I still have your back either way.
Right.
And my number 1 will, of course, have to be their version of Jake Holmes's Dazed and Confused. Now, as I mentioned, their version of that track is not included on any studio albums, but only on a couple live recordings there. That's about it.
And the best version runs about 6 minutes.
Yes.
Because there are a couple other versions that are much shorter.
And you can find the version I'm talking about on YouTube. Just type in Yardbirds, Dazed, Confused, and there you go. A performance of that track on a French television program there. You just get to see hear the original lyrics as written by Jake Holmes, and also you see Jimmy Page play his mirror Telecaster because I had a couple of round mirrors glued onto the surface there, which Fender Guitars, by the way, just issued out not too long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also when we see Page working that cello bow on his guitar throughout the go before going to the solo of that track there. And you also got to give it up to Page for wearing the coolest outfit that he wore during that taping of that song there. Apparently, at that time, around the '60s, a lot of British bands were dressed in more. They were dressed in like Prince and the Revolution way before Prince and the Revolution, if you know what I'm talking about there.
Yeah.
So, and that's about it. That's my top five for the Yardbirds there.
Okay. And I think that'll be an interesting thing that we can do, especially if we both have a list
Mm-hmm.
and we'll alternate. In other words, you'll do your number whatever, and I'll
Okay.
do my number whatever, and we'll go back
Okay.
and forth.
Okay.
I think the next one we want to do is we're going to backtrack and do Elvis.
Mm-hmm. The top 10 or top 15 Elvis songs that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we'll tell people that might be listening, it's not the best or whatever, it's our favorites.
Yeah, our
So
personal favorites. The ones
your
that
list might be different from mine. My list might be different from yours. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Hey, I think Joe Cronin's in my chat. Hey, you want to join the show and weigh into this conversation, Joe? Feel free to join in, dude. I want to see if we could get Joe Cronin. Hey, you want to come on the show with us, and talk about what we were talking about? We were talking about the Yardbirds there, and see if you want to have any of your personal picks there. Or if you want me to add you in, just let me know in the chat. Okay, man? All right, so we'll have to wait and see. So now, I'm at work. Possibly, we could probably... we talked about this earlier, folks. There was a good chance that me and Arknolia could do a couple of shows on a Friday because of my work schedule there. Now, on Thursday, I'll be working from 9 to 6 p.m. So any chance of making it on Real Spuck TV may be a little bit more slim. I have to join in later on that program there. We'll have to wait and see. So I'll have to see how it plays out because I have funny work schedules. Sometimes they have me work in the afternoons. Sometimes they have me working in the morning there for the past couple of times. But I'll have to wait and see and how it plays out. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And looks like Joe told you hi, so we'll tell him hi too.
All right, I saw him. Yes, wanted to say you and Arky there, and to throw down this tonight, you rated the Battle of the Bullfrog. Damn right, straight I am. And after what I heard the bullshit on Dave Rose's channel, oh boy, I'm ready to get I'm ready to whip out my lightsaber and jab him one.
Mm.
You have to go to Dave Rose's channel and you hear the whole bullshit that went down on there. This happened. Tell you what, Joe, you want me to add you into the call there? Let me know in the chat.
Okay. Meanwhile, I'll mention Friday we'll do our top 15, I guess, of Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do a second show, we'll do a top 10 of the Everly Brothers and a top 10 of Roy Orbison.
And
so get your list ready.
Okay, let's see here. Let's see if I can add. I don't think that is Joe Cronin in the channel. I don't know if he's... It says he's not available on Skype here. So I'll have to wait and see here. Let's find out what he has to say there. He says, let's get wet and wild tonight. All right, what else? Tell you what, if Bullfrog's going to be on the Throwdown tonight, I would definitely... see what's going on here. I'll probably ask him about this here. All right, so I guess that'll be it for tonight. I guess it's been a
Yeah, we're
while. We
done
got
with that.
yep. We don't think, and of course, like you said, this Friday we plan to do our top 10 lists of songs and acts by this artist, by that artist, whether it's the Beatles or Elvis. There.
Well, we'll do Elvis first,
Mm-hmm.
and then do a second show with Everly Brothers, Roy Orbison.
Okay.
Mainly because those two top 10's fine.
All right.
Elvis, we probably can do a top 15. We probably do more than that, but we'll
Yeah.
stick it to 15.
Well, of course, the Beatles is going to be a long list because, damn, they have a lot of good ones, right? That's for sure.
Well, I got an idea when we get to the Beatles what to do there.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I'm thinking we do two segments. One segment pre Sergeant Pepper, the second segment post Sergeant Pepper and beyond.
Oh, yeah, before Sergeant Pope, before, post, and beyond there. Yes, absolutely.
So I'm thinking that's what we do there.
All right.
But we'll get to that.
All right, definitely. Okay, so I guess that includes it for our episode 16 of our Music Memory series. We were discussing the Yardbirds and the legacy they have left on everybody here, including the
Right.
legacy of their three noted guitar players, Beck, Clapton, and Page. And so I guess that'll be it, I guess, for time being.
Yeah, and everybody take a listen because that's a group that deserves a listen.
Deserves a lot of respect as well because they never really achieved the big success that the Beatles and the Stones have when you look at it there. But they do
No, and
deserve
they probably contributed as much, if not more, than those two groups.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, so for Arknolia and myself, this is Arknolia and the Doctor, episode 16 of Music Memories. You guys have a good one, okay?
All right.
And
We'll
we
talk
look
to everybody
forward,
later.
and we look forward to doing this again this coming Friday night, okay? You guys have a good one.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so